So I hope you don't mind if we're together for a while because we have a lot to discuss. When you have certain specifications, certain rules and regulations as it relates to your care, they call you difficult, don't they?
Okay.
So this plant is not as scary as some people make it out to be. You're gonna do just fine. Welcome to Fiddle Leaf Fig. Today I'm going to be talking about my all-time favorite tree, my all-time favorite houseplant, the Fiddle Leaf Fig, with the scientific name of Ficus Lyrata. And right behind me here is Mr. Jesse. This is one of my big babies that I have. In this house currently, I've just given some away, but I have somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 Fiddle Leaf Figs at different stages. I do have some bushes. I don't remember how many bush versus tree, and I know I have about 3 or 4 of the Bambino variety. So they do come in the bush variety, the tree variety, and the Bambino variety. Spotted this fiddle, of course it was on some type of design channel, home design channel and home decor, and they were displaying it in a very specific way. It had to have the white pot, and it had to be a tree, and then it had to have a certain amount of leaves on the top, and they were pruning it and notching it to make it look a certain way, and I fell in love with it. But what I wanted to do was make sure I honor the plant. So a little bit about me. My name is Kinetic, and I started collecting plants. I'm not a horticulturalist. I am not a botanist. I am just a girl who loves plants. And I absolutely fell in love with this Fiddle Leaf Fig. So Fiddle Leaf Fig, that name comes from a time, a semi-dark time in my life where I was so obsessed that I was buying Fiddle Leaf Figs almost once a week or once every other week. And so my niece came to me, and I picked her up, and she looked in the back seat. She goes, "Auntie, you bought another Fiddle Leaf Fig?" And I just thought, oh, what a cute name. So we started saying Fiddle Leaf Fig, and that's what she and I started calling my figs, and so that's where the name came from. Once I did my research and found out that this tree was native to West Africa, oh, it was over then. I just really wanted to know everything about this tree. And one of the things I found in my research that I didn't see anybody who looked like they were from Sierra Leone or Cameroon that were giving these videos. So my heart's desire was to actually go to the country, actually find out what type of environment it lives in and how does it grow. So I did learn a few things. And I do have plans, y'all pray for me, that I can get to Sierra Leone, hopefully in a couple of months from now, and I will be able to experience these trees in their habitat. So they are native to West Africa, coastal city, I said city, I'm sorry, Sierra Leone and Cameroon, those 2 countries. When I say that it's coastal, they have like oceans, and they have rainforests, they have savannas. Most of these are in a rainforest atmosphere, so they are going to be in and amongst many other plants. They do receive bright indirect light, but mostly it's shared with other plants. And so that's why you'll hear people say they can get burned by the sun, because normally they're in a position where other plants will be sort of shading them, so they're not getting just the burning hot sun, but they are from Africa. Okay, so when they say no sun, it's like, it's African. At any rate, so I fell in love with it. I started to find out as much as I could about Sierra Leone and about Cameroon. I did find out that some of these start out as banyan trees. So as a banyan tree, that is an epiphyte, and they will lodge themselves onto another tree and send roots down and eventually strangle the host. What power is that? Just strangle them, just take over. So I have seen them as banyan trees also in photographs. Again, I have not had the fortune to go to the country, but this is a dream of mine because I'm so in love with the plants. Rules and regulations, rules and regulations, rules and regulations. This tree, if you're going to bring it into your home, you need to provide it with bright, indirect light. Very bright light, the brightest light you can give it without just mashing it up against the window and allowing it to be burned. And it will let you know. As we know, plants talk to us in different ways through their foliage, through different colors, browns and yellows, and the leaves and foliage move and stuff like that. So you do want bright, indirect light. No vents. Don't put it by your air conditioning vent, whether it's in the top of your ceiling or on the floor. Just be mindful if there's a vent, and be mindful if there's a draft. So if you have it near a door where there's a draft, they just like to be consistent with their airflow and with their humidity. You're going to want to keep it in a pot with drainage holes. So I know that we want to keep it decorative and keep it cute and everything like that. My suggestion is to keep it in the nursery pot with those drainage holes where you can monitor and maintain it, and just put it in the cute little basket or the cute little ceramic container, okay? If you can possibly live with keeping it in that nursery pot and just using those other pots as decorative pots, that would be so much better. In addition to that, my experience in my home, I have some larger plants, some philodendron psaloams, the Hope philodendron. I have one that I was so excited. I found this cute pot, and then I found a small pot so I can put the roots, the aerial roots in the small, and they were cute and everything like that. Once I put that in that pot, that was it, honey. It's not moving anywhere. That pot is so heavy. I can't take it outside. I love to put my plants outside when it rains. I love to give them a really nice shower every now and then and just water the plant thoroughly. Oh, no more of that, sweetheart. That's over, because that ceramic pot is heavy AF, okay? Oh my God!
Jesus Christ.
So if you can stand to keep it in the nursery pot, I would suggest you do that, okay? One, because of the amount of drainage holes. You do not want this plant sitting in water. One of the easiest way to kill this plant is with over watering, okay? I would love to tell you a schedule, to tell you water it every 7 days or every whatever days. What I will say is that I have a watering day. It is a scheduled watering day, which is Sunday. That for me is a suggestion. I have well over 100 and I don't know how many plants. Each plant is different, especially during different seasons, okay? So watering day is a suggestion. That is the time I come in and I prepare the water for everybody, but there are times when everybody doesn't need it. Now, if you live in a zone that has a true winter where your temperature drops 50, 40, and obviously below zero, you have to understand that these plants are not transpiring at a quick rate like they would be in the spring and summer. Transpiration is where the plant, through those roots, when you put that water or you put those nutrients, those roots will suck that up and they will send it out through the trunk, through the branches to the leaves, and then the leaves will release that into the air, and then it will be time for some more. But when the sun is not out during the winter months, it's not going to transpire as quickly. So therefore, you're going to need to water less often, and you're going to have to use less water. So just remember that during those months, if you live in a zone 10 or a zone 9, A or B, I believe you have a little more leeway because they don't really get a true winter. But if you have a winter where you have several months where the sun is not shining as strongly, then your plants are not going to need as much water. And that goes for all plants, especially the fiddle. And we have that pot with drainage holes. Jesse here, unfortunately, he's so big that I can't sit him up off the floor. Ideally, if you can pick him up off the floor, maybe on a little table or something, and you can water and let that water drain out. But I personally just use plain old $1, $2 drip pan, and I water it thoroughly allow that water to come through to the drip pan, and then I go ahead and collect whatever excess water is in the drip pan with a paper towel, or you can use a towel, or you can use, some people like to use a turkey baster. I've used all of those things. Sometimes the turkey baster can be a little tedious, but it's thorough because it gets all of the water out. So if I have to do a thorough watering inside the house, I will come over and grab one of my turkey basters, and I will use that, place it in the drip pan, and remove all the excess water. You can also use a towel, paper towel. The roots are so far away, unless this was really filled with water, they won't take up any more water. By now, having these trees so long, I pretty much know about how much water I can put in there without making a total mess. You want to go ahead and thoroughly water it, and then let that sit there for maybe 30 minutes to an hour. I have made the mistake and forgot and went to bed and woke up the next day and the tree was fine, as long as you just don't let it sit in water. I found that watering, if I want to give you a schedule, about every 7 to 10 days. But during the winter months, I've had some rainy times when there was just no sun. I've gone 2 weeks without, 2.5 weeks without watering my fiddles, and they've been just fine. I have, like I said, so many, they have different personalities. Let me just say that. So some of them will get really just this faint leaf look when they need water. I do have some that have consistent edema. No matter how much or how little I give them. So they're all different in their different ways, but roughly 7 to 10 days of watering. And in the spring and summer, during the growing seasons, I do one watering, and then the next one would be water with nutrients, and then the next one will be water, and so on and so forth. When you water your Fiddle Leaf Fig, what you want to do is go ahead and rotate it up. So you want to just turn it, because what you want to make sure is that all of the foliage is getting light all the time. So if one side of is facing the window, you want to turn it to the other side. I have Jerome is in sort of a corner where he's getting window from both sides, so he's fine. I don't really rotate that one that much, but on Jessie, it's a little different, and some of my other fiddles, it's a little different. So you hear me calling my fiddles by name: Fantasia, Fernando, Jessie, Filbert. I name them because that helps me keep track of their watering. It helps me keep track of their nutrition, and it helps me keep track of any pruning or anything I've done to them. So I would love to tell you, that that always works, but it doesn't. So if you can keep a plant journal where you can literally write down and go back and look, that's going to be the best. I want to say that I do it. I really want to say that. I bought one. It's cute. It's got like, I don't know, monstera leaves on it. Super cute. I haven't written anything in there. I'm going to do it though. Also name my plants, because if I have to have somebody come over, I use these little tags on my plant. And I said, water Jessie, and they can look and it says Jessie. Like, oh, okay. It makes it easier if I ever have to have somebody over to help me out. Okay. So getting back to these little rules and regulations. Okay. Want to keep it in that pot with the drainage holes. In addition to that, maybe once a month, maybe every other month, depending on your home and how much dust it collects, you want to clean the leaves. Again, for photosynthesis purposes, for transpiration purposes, the leaves need to be cleaned so that they can do what they need to do to survive. I personally don't use anything like a leaf shine or any type of chemicals. I just use a lint-free cloth and warm water. Every now and then I'll use my neem oil mix to go ahead and wipe down my leaves, so I'm getting a dual purpose of keeping the leaves clean and also treating it for pests. Because I have most of my plants in this enclosed area, I don't get too many pests, but just in case I do that. They do live in a rainforest area, so that means it rains 3 or 4 days, and then it stops for days and days. So they're used to being really, really wet and then really, really dry. So you can give them a nice thorough watering. You can put them in your shower. I personally am super excited when it rains. I throw everyone outside and let them get rain and let them just get soaked, and then I bring everybody in and I allow them to dry out all the way until the next watering day. When you're talking about repotting them, when you buy plants from stores like that, 9 times out of 10 you may have to repot them when you get home. However, these fiddles do not have a problem being root bound. So you can leave them in their pot for 1 to 2 years. I like to wait until the roots are sort of coming out of the drainage holes, because I keep mine in a nursery pot. So I like to wait until they're super, super root bound before I repot mine, because they're fine with that. I haven't had any problems with, I mean, I have some that are root bound, and especially during the winter months when the growth is slower, you definitely don't want to repot them. You definitely don't want to prune them. You definitely just want to leave them alone. They need that growing season to be able to recuperate from whatever, wounds or that cuts or whatever. So they need that time, or the repotting, they need that time. So in winter, they're not really growing that rapidly. So you really just kind of want to leave them alone. So come springtime, April 1st is my last frost date. I have to repot probably all 16 of mine. I don't know, but there are quite a few that I know I'm going to be repotting. So the way you can determine if your plant needs water, very easy. Visually, you just look at it. It looks dry, or if the leaves, like I said, some of my leaves just kind of, oh God, oh Lord, oh God. So if you see that, you can also just stick your finger right in that soil, about 1.5 inches, 2 inches down. If the top 2 inches of soil are dry, then you can go ahead and water. You can also pick your plant up and feel it. If it feels light and you don't feel any weight of water in there, then you know it's time. If you can't trust yourself with those methods, then go ahead and get a moisture meter. I've seen them for as little as $8, $9 on Amazon somewhere, and I've even seen them in Walmart. So you can get a moisture meter, and then you will know exactly when you need to water. If your house is on the dry side, if you're running an air conditioning, if you're running a heater, you may want to consider a humidifier. If you don't want to do a humidifier, then you can always mist your plant every other day. They do like, as I said before, that consistent humidity around them. So if you can get a humidifier, that's great. But if you can't, another trick other than misting them, I like to group plants together, because they will transpire and give each other additional humidity. And if I group plants together, I take a glass of water and I just put it in between all those plants, and whatever evaporation, I mean, it's a very slow process, but at least it's something, and at least it's consistent, okay? So when we want to talk about food, feeding them, and fertilizer, we want to talk about the NPK, which is the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium, okay? We want something that's rich in nitrogen. Nitrogen in any kind of fertilizer is what makes the leaves really, really green and really, really strong. It's foliage. It is the nitrogen portion for the most part. So that's for your collard greens and your Brussels sprouts. Not so much for your cucumbers. You're going to look at the phosphorus for your fruits and for your flowers. So the nitrogen-rich fertilizers are the best. I personally use a basic fertilizer, so I can use it for all my plants. This is not going to be always, but for right now, I'm on a budget, so I try to use things that I can utilize throughout, my collection, and I'm not at the point where I want to buy a specific fertilizer for a specific plant, but they're out there, and you can buy literally a Fiddle Leaf Fig fertilizer. You can buy a Fiddle Leaf Fig soil. That's just not what I'm doing at this point. So I try to use something that is a little more generic that I can use throughout. So the fertilizer I use is Alaskan fish fertilizer, and it has an NPK number of 511. So more nitrogen than phosphorus and potassium. Let me tell you about this Alaskan fish fertilizer. Okay? It smells like 2 dead possums in a black garbage bag in the summer heat of the Florida Everglades on a 98-degree weather day after the weekend.
Oh, hell no!
It is stinky, okay? And in a room like this, when everybody gets fed, it just smells horrible. But it works. It has worked for me as a generic fertilizer, but you can also use something like a Miracle Grow, something that you can get if you too are on a budget, and that works as well. In the spring and summer months, I do one water with nutrients, one water, and so on and so forth. I do back off during the winter. Now, if you're fortunate enough, God has blessed me with a lovely sunroom where I can close all these doors and I can create an environment where my plants really kind of don't know it's winter, because I make sure I keep it between 60 and 80 degrees. I have humidifiers going, so my plants think it's summer all year long. I want to talk about propagation. I want to talk about pruning. I want to talk about notching and all of those things. However, what I want to do is talk about that in a different video, because I want to ask you guys that if you have your plants and they're still under 4 to 6 feet, just give it some time. Okay, it's very exciting when you get this plant and you want to see it grow in certain ways. You want to see it do that, but this has to mature for a while before you do that. And sometimes you will get a plant that has multiple trees in one container. That is a blessing, and that has happened to be on multiple times. I thought it was a bush, and I got home, I was like, no, it's 5 trees. Let me see if I can show you. This is Fernando. Fernando has 5 different trees in one pot. So when we're talking about Fernando and this plant, this was a rescue plant. It's so beat up, but it's still living and still putting out new leaves. But I am going to take this one apart, and that I will put up the video when I go ahead and take this apart. But this has 5 different trees. That's different. That's not taking Jesse and notching him and trying to promote some branching or trying to take a cutting. I would not do that because this plant is so small. It still needs some more time. So that's just me. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it before it was between 4 and 6 feet, but you can do it if you want to. Also, if you want to do any pruning, any notching, any propagating, any air layering, all of those things, I would not do it during the winter months. Okay, so that's pretty much it. They're being sold as these fickle trees, and they're awful, and they're terrible, and they're so hard to manage. However, let me say it like this. If you go to work every day at 9 o'clock and you get off at 5 o'clock, you know your schedule. If you start showing up at 10:30, what do you expect? These are the rules of the tree. You follow the rules, it should be fine. As long as you understand what those rules mean. So let's get into some of these myths surrounding the infamous Fiddle Leaf Fig. One of the biggest myths is you never, ever, ever, ever move your fiddle. Okay, if you're going to put your fiddle in a spot that has the bright light, the bright indirect light, no vents, no drafts, and it's in a good spot, and you're going to move your fiddle from that good spot to another good spot, you should be fine. I have moved my fiddles in taping TV shows and whatnot. I have driven my fiddles out of state, put them in a car and driven them out of state, and then drove them back, and they didn't drop one leaf. The most that happened is trying to smash my larger fiddles in the car. I've broken a stem or something like that, but they haven't dropped any leaves just because I move it from side to side, or I move it from one side of the room to another, especially if I'm following the rules. So when they say do not ever move it, what that means is if you have it in a good spot where there are no vents and no drafts, and it has the bright indirect light, and then you move it to a room with less light, and you move it in front of a vent, of course it's going to react to that, okay? But it's not like you can never move it. Obviously, you're taking it from the nursery to your home, so you can obviously move it. But what that rule is just, the interpretation of that rule is that you don't want to just be moving your fiddle every time you see something wrong with it. Find the best spot for it. If that's a good spot and it's growing and it's doing well, then just chill out. Don't be sliding it all around, and definitely don't move it to someplace that does not have the same exact lighting and the same exact aeration and warmth and everything like that. So that's what don't move it. Another myth is no sun. It's really good during the spring and summer if you can find somewhere where there may be a few other trees covering some what they consider to be dappled light, meaning that the tree is not getting just direct hard-hitting sun. For example, you're not going to sit it in the middle of your driveway because it's a rainforest plant. So it shares the rainforest with other plants. So there'll be plants, you know, maybe higher or maybe lower, and it's sort of getting light, but it's not sitting directly in the sun. I mean, I don't go outside and stand in the middle of my driveway in July. So why would you do that to your tree? But when they say no sun, oh my God, it's going to get burned. That's what that means. Or if you're going to smash it up against a west-facing window or south-facing window where the sun is just beating down on it, of course it's going to get burned because it shares its space with other plants. So that doesn't mean no sun, just you need to know what kind of sun. So that's one of the rules that can be misinterpreted, as long as it is, you know, sort of a light that's not too harsh, but it has to be bright. Because one of the greatest things to do is put your fiddle outside during the spring and summer, and you can see it flourish. As long as you keep it treated for pests and everything, oh, you'll see the growth. It'll be tremendous, okay? Another one of the myths is don't touch it. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Well, what I will say, if it's up against a wall or there's a cord touching it all the time, rubbing up against it, that's what they mean by don't touch it. I'm a little bit of a plant freak. So I will come in the morning and say good morning to everybody. I will hug my tree. I will, oh, Jesse. And I do all of that crazy stuff. And I haven't had a leaf drop because I touched it. But that doesn't mean that every day I'm going to be, you know, annoying the tree. You wouldn't do that to any person. You wouldn't do that to any other plant. So when they say don't touch it, that doesn't mean you can't ever touch it. These rules are kind of self-explanatory because it's like, okay, they say it's toxic to little kids and toxic to pets. It's when they ingest it. So my dear friends, if you are chewing your houseplants, that's a whole other video. Like some rules that I feel like are self-explanatory, okay? So we talked about the no touching, we talked about the no sun, and the no moving. Also, I hear all the time people say that it loves moisture. It loves moisture. When they refer to loving moisture, they are not referring to the soil. They are referring to the humidity. If it's in a rainforest, like I said, if you group plants together, you're going to create a humid environment. So that does not mean that you're going to keep your soil wet. This is why I brought up the humidifier or the glass of water or keeping it surrounded with other plants so that it can maintain a certain level of humidity. Okay, so when they say it loves moisture, they're referring to humidity. Other than that, this whole, you know, idea that these are the hardest plants in the world and they're just born to die, and it's not true. Once you learn it, once you understand the plant, then it's fine. I mean, I've killed aloe, I've killed pothos. I mean, it just depends on what you're doing. So this is no more difficult. For me, it hasn't been any more difficult than any of my other plants. Sometimes we forget or we do things wrong by mistake. But, you know, other than that, I mean, it's just how you create your environment. As I mentioned, I created this environment with all these humidifiers and this heat and moisture and things like that, where a lot of things grow here. Does that mean my thumb is greener than anyone else? Not necessarily. It's just the environment that I created. So once you learn what this plant needs, then you create that environment, you'll be good to go. And you'll have lots of years for this beautiful Fiddle Leaf Fig. So let's take a moment and look at my watering method. So if you don't have rainwater, tap water is fine. My fiddles never minded having tap water. I just like the rainwater. If you don't have rainwater and you don't want to use tap water, you can fill up your watering cans with tap water, let it sit out 24, 48 hours, and then you can use that to water the plants. So on my larger plants, as I said before, Ficus Lyrata likes to be root bound. So this soil is pretty packed in and thick, so I use chopsticks. You can get chopsticks probably, I don't know, 50 for $2 or something like that at a local market. Really inexpensive. But so you want to mimic a worm sort of being in the dirt, so you want to kind of wiggle through and go down as far as possible. Try not to break up any of the roots. You're trying to find the little soily places. And on a tree Jessie size, I would make 6 to 8 holes. This is pretty root bound. I hope you can see that, but I wait until the roots are sort of coming out, so it's gonna be soon, and you can also see because it's pulling away from the side of the pot. So I always use this method of, you know, the sort of fake worm method. I use that before watering, so I make sure that the water is not just sitting on top. Now, because it's pretty dry in here, you may have to water it, wait a few minutes for the top part of the soil to receive the water, and then you can do a second coat of water.
Hit the record button.
It's like a breath of fresh air.
I hope you are as excited as I am about the Fiddle Leaf Fig, the Ficus Lyrata, and hopefully if you don't have a Fiddle Leaf Fig, you're gonna go out and get one, and let's get growing, all right? Follow me at Fiddle Leaf Fig. You can write to me at fiddleleaffig@gmail.com, or you can comment below. And make sure that you like and subscribe so you can see more plant videos, and I will let you guys know when the TV show launches and airs, and it's gonna be fun, all right? Love you guys, mean it. Bye. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I know it was a long video. I certainly hope it was worth it.